were the 1 million Muslim people from the Balkans, okay, who were brought in. All those, I mean, were like instruments that were ready to go and do the pillage. Now, the victim of the Balkans becomes a victimizer. That's very interesting, and nobody has yet studied the issue from that point of view. Nobody has, today, for example, the Kurds put forth lots of apologies, this and that, but in reality, most of the Armenian lands, personal level I'm speaking, the lands are they were the ones who got the lands and are sitting on those lands. Where are the material wealth of the Armenians? And I'm not speaking about the monument, churches, this, that. Wealth, gold, this, that. It's all gone, government. There are lots of issues that have to be discussed, and they are not being discussed. The only issue that is being discussed is the acknowledgement of the genocide. But there are lots of issues that have not yet been discussed because the first issue is not finalized yet, okay? Now, let's go a little bit and speak about the period after the genocide. Now, one of the issues that happened is that the male population was the one that was massacred most. And if you look at the statistics that we have after the genocide, you will see that in the Middle East, for example, you have a whole generation of Armenians who were raised without fathers or grandfathers. So the male character is missing. By the way, before speaking about that, let me also include one more thing. The issue is not that the Armenian massacres happened only in Turkey. There were a couple of other places that they happened too. One of them being in the northwestern corridor of Iran, like in Baku, Khoy, Salmas, Urumia, and those people went south into Iraq, and some of the people from those areas remained in Iraq for some time. First in Bakuba, and then in Nahar Umar, and then in Baghdad, and then some of them went back to their villages in the Salmas area, but some of them remained in Iraq, what became Iraq, with the Shadakh Armenians of Van. The other one is what happened in Baku in 1918. The Baku Armenians and Russians had to defend the city for like 8-9 months, and there were about 20,000 massacred until the British would reach. Because Nuri Pasha, the paternal uncle of Enver Pasha, had got there with an army of 10,000 expeditionary force to take over Baku, because Baku was important for them to be able to establish ties with the Turkic people on the other side of the Caspian Sea. Now in the Middle East, let's go back to our story. There you had a whole generation of young people who were raised without a fatherly figure, because the men and the grandfathers were massacred. Now we call those people the people who didn't have childhood. And it seems that it was, now I'm trying to bring in issues that have not been discussed yet. It seems that we went back to a matrilocal or matriarchal way of life, which continues even today in the Armenian reality. I mean, the mother or the grandmother of the family is the one who rules in the Armenian family because of this situation. And this is important. The other thing is that even after 100 years, almost 100 years, next year it will be the centennial of the Armenian genocide. The issue of the Armenian genocide and the problems of the Armenian genocide, like the deportations into the Syrian desert and then into the countries of the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, etc. Look at most of those communities. You will see that the Armenian community of Iraq is decimated because you know of what happened. The Armenian community of Egypt is almost non-existent. I don't know what's going to happen to the Coptic community of Egypt, which totals about between 10 to 17 million, they say. I don't have the numbers, but that's the situation. Now, in the past 20 years, the Armenian community of Lebanon was decimated. Now today, it's not what it used to be, but it's also tied to the issue of what's going to happen in Syria. The Armenian community of Syria, Aleppo especially, is decimated. 50% of them left. And a month ago, we saw what happened in Kesab, which was the last vestige of Armenian presence in Syria. So where are we going in all of this? Those are questions that we are asking ourselves, and we don't have answers yet to these questions. It seems that 100 years later, we have more questions than answers. And this is not good. Because 100 years later, we should have solved some of the issues of history. It seems that our history is running faster than us. We were not able to write the history of the diasporan communities, and those diasporan communities are going away. Would you imagine that? We didn't write the diasporan history of Armenians in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and those diasporan communities are vanished, and we haven't written the histories yet. This is very interesting. It seldom happens in historical terms. I can go on and take much of your time, guys, but I want to make this into an interactive forum at this point. And that's why I want you to do your comments and also ask your questions. And that's why I'm going to leave this, to make this into an open forum, because we are here to get educated. I told you some things, but I am sure that I will be educated from what you are going to say, from what you are going to ask, and I'm going to try to answer if I can. Okay, so the floor is yours. And this is a very informal now, so don't get any sense of being ashamed or even speak your minds. Yes.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thanks a lot. But let's speak. Yes. Yes.
How come there was not publications and it was not publicized about the genocide of Armenians in Turkey? We, heard from Holocaust of Jewish from very childhood, but lately I have heard.
Unfortunately, the issue was that Turkey, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the government that was established in Turkey was a nationalist government, which was also very harsh on the Turkish population itself. It is only lately, in the last 15 years, with the coming of the AK party, that there is some sort of openness in the society, and more academicians are starting to write about those issues. You couldn't see this, for example, 20 years ago, when there was only one linear line that the Turkish academicians would follow, and that would be the line of the government, that the government would impose on them. Today there are many academicians who are writing based on archival research and things like that, and which is good. But let's see if that will continue. I think it will continue. We are in a situation where, but on the other side, our historiography is also was also very linear. We also have to rectify some of the issues of our historiography regarding what happened. And it's up to a new generation of historians to learn the languages, and like I did. Unfortunately, the problem is that in the diaspora today, even with all those chairs that we have, we are not going to produce a second generation of scholars who are competent in the fields, because the chairs are not producing anybody anymore. The chairs are being taken away from our hands and going into other stuff, like the one that happened in the chair where I studied. I studied at UCLA. It is modern Armenian history. Now the occupier of the chair is like a specialist in 16th, 17th century Armenian trade in the Indian Ocean. I don't know what is important in that. Maybe it is to have one person who specializes in that. But I don't think he will be able to teach and prepare a generation of new scholars in modern Armenian history. Yes?
Sorry, thank you so much for speaking. It's been a couple years since I've studied, but could you speak more to the role of, I guess, separatist or revolutionary Armenian movements within the Ottoman Empire? And then with that, a lot of British intervention that actually saw, value in toppling the Ottoman Empire could have actually played a role.
Don't forget that this was, there is the old adage, which sick men of Europe, etc., etc. They didn't want, there is this song by is it the Eagle? Hotel California. That song comes to my mind. They gather for the feast, okay? They want to grab the beast and cut it, but they can't. That was the situation with the Ottoman Empire. Everybody wanted so big a piece that they were saying, no, let's keep it as is, because we are going to fight over this. That was the reason why the Ottoman Empire survived. But at some point, when Ottoman Empire, the Young Turks, the Armenians, and other revolutionaries came to create a new polity and make the country into a modern state, Europe said no. Everything but not this. You can't make this into a modern country because that's out of the question. They didn't want that. They didn't want that for Iran either. Because constitutional countries tend to become very modern countries. And with the resources they have, they could create problems for Europe. Europe doesn't want other countries to become really democratic. They want their money, and that's why they don't want democracy. Don't believe them. Don't believe them when they say they want good for Ukraine or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I had.
Unfortunately. Yes.
Well, I was wondering, there was a movement, Zionism predates the Holocaust, the Jewish Holocaust. I wondered if there was any kind of movement, if the Armenians could have, if they had anything similar to that in the 19th century, that if they could have done anything to get some land of that they were living in these lands.
It's very interesting. There were Zionists who were already coming to Palestine at the time. And they were also having problems with the Ottomans, especially Jamal Pasha, who was the leader of the Fourth Army, the commander of the Fourth Army. And there were sometimes Jamal Pasha had even decided to deport them from Palestine, Tel Aviv, etc. but they were able to give some money to the cause of the Ottomans, to the army, etc., etc. But don't forget that they were accused of helping the British as from the like clandestinely, but not in the sense that Enver brought the Armenians in as the fifth column that were working with the Russians, okay, and tried to make them the scapegoat, okay? Because they were living much further from the front line than the Armenians were living in the eastern vilayets of the Ottoman Empire. That was the difference between the two people. There was an article about this by someone in the Jerusalem Post, if I'm not mistaken, like a couple of days ago. Spoke about this particular issue. Tal, his name is Tal. Yes. There were some hands that, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Moumdjian, for coming and educating us. This was very interesting education. Like the quote says, you know, that those who are not aware of the past are condemned to repeat it. And just looking at your discussion and knowing the history of Armenians, it seems like genocide continues and that massacres continue. And my question is, I mean, education, taking action, trying to be a good Armenian, but not only a good Armenian, but a good human being, and telling others and living through example. My question is, what is your opinion, or what is your advice on how we can continue to teach others and take action so that this, hopefully one day, will become non-existent?
Well, regarding the issue of this becomes non-existent, I am very doubtful, by the way, let me tell you. Today, 100 years after the Armenian genocide, you have maybe 500 cases of genocides that have happened or are happening still. It means that today, humanity is more inhumane than it was maybe 100 years ago. And this is really disturbing because at the moment I'm speaking, God knows, somewhere in Africa or in some places in Africa, genocides are being committed right now. I mean, what is this that makes us so unique in some sense, in terms of humanity, and makes us so unique in some sense that we debase ourselves to become even worse than animals who kill only for their own survival, not more than that, you know? So this is something that I think philosophers and psychologists should come to address, this problematic issue in human beings of why? I mean, what is this ethnic cleansing thing? What is so different that people go all the way to clean the world from somebody or some group that is different from you? I mean, what? Who gave you the right to do this thing? I mean, you know? I can't understand the reasoning behind it, political or otherwise. But it's very, I mean, disturbing. I mean, the only other thing I could think of is the Malthusian theory or so. We have to decrease our numbers because we are not able to sustain all these people and feed them. I mean, in the age of plenty, imagine, I mean, people are dying because of hunger anyways. And then you add up this by, I don't know, I'm perplexed. I will come back to you.
Yeah.
Do you think it's actually any different today than it was in the past? The only thing that's different today, it seems to be the 24-hour news cycle and the spread of information and access to information that we have, as opposed to before where news took a very long time to travel. Today we see...
But on the other hand, I think the politicians who are involved in this have become immune to the issue of people speaking about those issues, as if we have a saying that goes by, as if their skin has become like that of an alligator, you know, very thick, so they can take it. That also puzzles me, that we are speaking about you, for example, and he doesn't care. He still continues with his way. Look at what happened to Bashir, the president of Sudan. Huh? What happened to him, I mean? But on the other hand, we took two people to court, in international court, for the crimes in Serbia, you know? It's not commensurate to the number of cases in the world. If you are going to give a lesson, you have to be equal-handed in many cases. I mean, the international community is not doing its job. It's picking, okay, and that's not good. It should be like the blind lady of justice. It's not doing its job like that. Yes, ma'am, you had something.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your time first to share your knowledge, but I was hoping that you would elaborate on a question that was asked earlier about reporting this genocide in 1915. You said that both Armenian culture and Turkish have a linear way of looking at it, but I'm not exactly sure what it means. Were they only looking ahead and trying to forget? Were they afraid to report what happened?
No, when I'm speaking about the issue is not the massacres themselves. They are well documented. The issue is the historical paradigm regarding the issue, which means that we have to look at the antecedent period and really do a historical paradigm that takes in all the complexities of the issue. We haven't done yet that. That was the case I was referring to. And in order to do that, it's the time for archival historians to do that job. We just started that, and more archives are becoming available. They were closed before. So I'm not blaming the historians who came before me, but the new historians have more jobs to do, because they have to learn the languages and also do the archival research. I think there was...
Yes, as we know that the American government doesn't recognize the genocide, and we know the cause of that because of Turkish geopolitical situated in that region. But what about German government? I think they didn't recognize too. And what was the role of the German government in 1915 in the genocide in Armenia? If you can answer. Thank you.
There are several books that came out regarding the issue of the German complicity or the role of the German military in the events of 1915 and the years that came afterwards. Now, the issue is this. First of all, America has acknowledged the Armenian genocide several times. And going back to the Senate, I don't know. It has become a habit, a very bad habit, that I don't think has any I mean, we are repeating something that has been done before and has been accepted. I mean, there are tons of resolutions. The last one was President Reagan. I mean, President Reagan said it outright, that it is a genocide. I mean, why do we do this? I don't know. There are now new academicians who are saying enough is enough. Let's take this to a pertinent court of law, and let's make a case, a legal case out of this issue, and let's go into that direction. Enough is enough in terms of having only the political, having parliaments decide on this issue alone, okay? That's one of the issues. I mean, I don't know why we are not taking it to a court of law. The issue is the verbiage or the language that is going to be used. Because you know that even justice is politicized. Okay? Now, at the time, the verbiage used was crimes against humanity. And then came the word genocide. And then the Genocide Convention. If you ask me, each people in its ultimate and infinite wisdom has verbiage for this kind of calamities, you know. The Jews called it the Shoah. Okay, we have called it the Moumdjian or a couple of other names. I mean, what's wrong with the names that we chose for those calamities? Once again, I have a problem in terms of the Eurocentric words that they create, and they want us to follow it, to follow the Eurocentric model. Okay? And hence, the issue is now, because they created the word, they created the convention, we have to go after that convention and spend all this money, spend all this time and this and that to have the word genocide attached to it. I mean, for a long time it was Moumdjian, and those are words that came from our culture, from our civilization. I mean, those were words that came out from our internalization of the issue. I am not a linguist or an expert in those kind of issues, but I also give value to those things. But even if we are going to go in that direction, the issue is that after 99 years, there are 20 countries that have given us those carte blanches in terms of their countries' parliaments having those resolutions. Not enough, okay? We need more. I mean, there are 186 countries in the world. But why are we choosing that way? I mean, and why aren't we going in the direction of international court of law? Arababian has been speaking about that for years now.
Yeah, that's okay, but my question was, how come, let's say, French government took that, and Germans not? Maybe because German has more interest on Turkish side.
It could be, but Britain has not acknowledged it yet, and Britain was an allied power. I mean, why do we have to speak about Germany when Britain is there and has not acknowledged it?
British do it, doesn't, yeah, it's the same.
There's more Armenians in France and Paris than in Germany, of course.
You have to say there are more Turks in Germany, a lot more.
That too. Yes, all these are factors. All these are, see, it's become, exactly. It is a political issue. It has nothing to do with truth and justice. It's not, unfortunately. Yes.
So, I wasn't here for the beginning, but Armenia was not a country, or at least was considered a country after 1453, right?
428 AD.
428 AD?
428 AD, Armenia was divided between the Byzantines and the Persians.
Well, what about the Cilician Empire? Or kingdom?
Yeah, Cilician Kingdom was an Armenia outside of historical Armenia. Armenians lived there for almost 3 centuries. Look, you are asking the question to a person who comes from Cilician Armenia, okay? But even today, even if you look at the Sèvres Treaty and also at the arbitration of President Wilson. Cilicia is not there. My family, my ancestors come from Marash. And regardless of that, I've been to Marash in 2009. Even if someday there is some sort of reparation, which is very hard, by the way, but you never know how the politics of the world goes, okay? The Cilician Armenia was never considered part of any deal that Armenians have put forth. Aside from that, the last vestige of Cilician Armenia was Kesab, okay? And look what happened to Kesab after 100 years. So if it happens in Kesab, it can happen everywhere. I mean, even if we are living here, don't think you are in relative safeness. Yes.
We call ourselves Hayat. Why the country calls Armenia?
It's a very interesting issue. There was a German archaeologist by the name of Peter Jensen wrote a book in 1899, published in 1899, called The Hittites and Armenians. The Hittite name in their own language was Hat.
It's
Hat.
Hat.
And the T in Hat and the Y are interchangeable because the Hat is also an Indo-European people. And he also proves in that book that the name Hai
Okay.
is from the Hittites, who are Armenian, by the way. Now, speaking about politics, look at the year. It was published in 1899, the same year that the Kaiser was going to visit Constantinople and have some things to do with the Sultan regarding the Baghdad-Berlin railway. Okay? So that book was put in some dossier, and for 100 years nobody spoke about that book. And now some Armenian professor brought it to the light, and we are speaking about the Huts being Armenians, the Hittites. There is also a big problem because if you go to any museum in Turkey, the Hittites are presented as the progenitor of the Turks.
They've been older than Armenia. They've been 4,000 years old.
No, but if you look at this, if you look at the hieroglyphs, because they had hieroglyphs before the cuneiform writing that they had, and the hieroglyphs, Peter Jensen was reading pure Armenian. It was in pure Armenian, Karabakh. But there were some people who didn't like that at the time, because it meant that the Armenians were around a millennia before their time, and they were all over Asia Minor. Okay. Yes.
Sir, a lot of people, I think, would agree that there's quite a bit of corruption that's happening.
I can't hear you. Can you speak a little bit louder?
A lot of people would agree that there's currently quite a bit of corruption that occurs in the Armenian government. And I was wondering whether you can attribute any kind of historical facts to why there is so much corruption.
No, because the issue is that there hasn't been an Armenian state for a long period of time. So corruption is a new model that came with the Soviet Union and the creation of the Soviet Armenian state. Okay? That has to be very clear. The other problem is that 22 years after the independence of this new Armenian state, we haven't yet created the blueprint of a national cognizance for that state so that we would become a nation state. We are a state today, yes, but we are not a nation state. A nation state means that there are some elements on which all of us agree. And then there are other things we can disagree on. But for 22 years, they haven't brought the core elements of national cognizance. And they are not going to do it very soon either. I'm speaking about this for like the last 2 years and writing about it, that there should be a manifesto of national cognizance, which should be in the Sahmanat, what do you call it? The Constitution. Because Armenia is not like other countries. Armenia is very pure. I'm not putting this in a racist way, by the way. Armenia is a very pure state because there are no minorities in Armenia, except for some Kurds who have been, so national cognizance is very important and we don't have that. Yes.
So where does the Tashnak-Sagan revolution occur in the genocide? How do you finish that?
So it's a long story. I've written about that. A chapter that had to be about 40 pages, now went over 115. It's going to be published soon. The whole issue is about the 8th General Congress in Erzurum, and then the formation of the Armenian volunteer units. It's a very complicated issue. I would suggest that you read that article when it comes out. And it's, as I said, it's all archival research, so there are no, I would say 90% archival material, 10% memoirs. So it's totally new paradigm that I'm drawing.
Well, I was saying because I've seen many maps of Armenia during, like, when was it, 1918 through 1921. And apparently the French, they intervened and said this is, like, they had half of Anatolia.
Well,
but then they had
those were
Armenia today.
Those were the Sykes-Picot agreement maps, where Anatolia was going to be divided into an Armenian part, and then there would be a French part, an Italian part, and also a Turkish part. For the Turks, they had left like a small portion out there in the north western part of the country, of Asia Minor. But look at it this way: when you draw maps, you also put forth the issue that I will enforce this map by my military force. After 1918, the Allied powers didn't have the forces on the ground. They were exhausted. The only actual force on the ground in Anatolia was the Greek army, which was about 500,000. But the Greek army disintegrated against Mustafa Kemal's forces, which were much lower in number, but they were really fighting for their existence apparently. And that Greek force, which was an invasion force, was ousted all the way out and back to Greece. Yes.
We had a large community of Armenian people in Iran, in almost every city. What was the reason that there were lots of Armenians living in Iran for centuries?
Since 1604, when Shah Abbas fought the Ottomans and on his way back, he used the, what do you call that, the land, torching the land policy. And also he took lots of Armenians, especially from Julfa in Armenia, Julfa, and took them over to Isfahan, Nisfu Jihan, you know, and created the new Julfa community over there. But there were also some Armenians who were who started living in Tabriz and also in that corridor of Khoy, Maku, Khoy, Salmas, Urmia region, which was very important during the revolutionary times, because most of they even had arms manufacturing operation over there and arms smuggling operation from there. And those villages were very important during the Iranian constitutional revolution, by the way. I also write about that because even the Young Turks were working with the Armenians, with the Tashnaks, by going and fighting in Iran. And interestingly, it was the Tashkilat-i Mahsuseh which later became involved in the killing of Armenians. But the body that worked with the Armenians in Iran was their clandestine operation, which was the Tashkilat-i Mahsuseh. Yes?
Mr. Moumdjian, would you please just give a timeline starting genocide events in 1915, how it's happened, step by step, in short, if you can. Just refresh our memory.
To refresh your memory, it started in May 1915 by, if I can, I don't have a laser to point out, but let's put it this way. It started in May 1915, mostly in the vilayets that were on the border, okay? Like Erzurum, Sasun, etc. The only place where they were not able to kill and deport was Van, because there was a self-defense battle over there. And then from there, there was a Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. It went into Cilicia, and then afterwards it went into the interior of the country. Okay? In Tier 1, for example, you have Dikranagert or Diyarbakir, which was one of the bloodiest places on earth during the genocide because of the Kurdish elements that existed there. So it was in tiers. So you just remember the 3 tiers: the border vilayets, Cilicia, and then the rest of the